This episode is presented by Visit Cedar City Bryan Head Tourism Bureau. Discover the art of adventure at Utah's gateway to the parks. Cedar City is within a few hours' drive from 6 different national parks and monuments, and only 30 minutes from fresh snow at Bryan Head Resort. Check out visitcedarcity.com to plan your next trip. This episode is sponsored by the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center. Dedicated to supporting local businesses and entrepreneurs, it provides resources and services aimed at fostering business creation, growth, and retention. The center features the Makerspace, where entrepreneurs and small businesses can have access to 3D printers, video production and photography equipment, t-shirt printing, and more. Whether you're starting a new venture or looking to expand an existing one, the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center offers the tools and guidance to help you succeed. To learn more and get involved, visit innovationcenter.cc. Hello and welcome to the Explore Local podcast presented by Visit Cedar City Bryan Head in partnership with Cedar City Iron County Economic Development. Produced by Dallas Smith Media, and I'm your host, David Johnson. All right, and welcome to the podcast. Today, we have Chip Lupo, who's a writer and analyst for WalletHub. Welcome, Chip.
Oh, welcome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Glad to have you on. So I don't think a lot of people know, at least your common Joe may not know what WalletHub is. So you want to give me the high level, what is WalletHub?
Well, WalletHub is a personal finance website. We primarily offer subscribers free access, daily updated credit reports, credit scores. We also offer budgeting tools and credit card recommendations, just a wide range of financial products, stuff that I kind of wish that I had access to 20 years ago to kind of stay on the right track financially. We also do comprehensive studies based on finance and other demographic things, just to give consumers just a general idea of city studies, what the best places for this and that are. Just it's more or less comprehensive. Just we try to make it a one-stop shopping for anything finance and consumer related.
That's awesome. Well, the reason why we have you on the podcast today is over the last few years, Cedar City has been ranked by WalletHub nationally in the top small cities in the country to start a business or to bring a business. And this year, your rankings just came out in April. Cedar City was ranked number 3. Now, last year we were number 1, but I'll give it to my peers down in St. George, who took the number 1 spot this year. We've kind of played a little bit of a shell game of first, second, and third with some of our Southern Utah peers. But tell me a little bit more about that ranking, because it's big for us, a town of 42,000 people. Tell us about that ranking. What does it mean? And we could dive in as deep as we want there with it.
Well, what I found fascinating was, and also Washington, Utah is number 4 on the list,
exactly.
Which to me was fascinating. You have these 3 small cities. And now, by small cities, we're talking about populations ranging from 25,000 to 100,000.
Right.
We have 3 cities along a stretch of I-15 in the southwest corner of Utah, essentially less than an hour apart from each other. And Washington, of course, practically right next door to St. George. Mm-hmm. We did something key when we were kind of talking offline about the tourism.
Yeah.
And part of tourism is having enough businesses to be able to accommodate the tourists. And that's prime fertile ground for startup or mom and pop businesses to be able to set up just about anything to cater to tourism. So that's key. So those two kind of go hand in hand.
That's interesting. Well, what's also fascinating to me is not only are 3 of the top 5 cities in the country are right here in the southwest corner of Utah, but I think we have 8 in maybe like the top 55 in the top 25 from Utah, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Utah is well represented in the small cities study, and it speaks to a larger picture as far as the state of Utah is concerned, because in our best states to start up a business, Utah is ranked 3rd for 2025, having been ranked 1st in the previous 2 years.
Right.
that's not necessarily a slight on Utah because the top two states, Florida and Georgia, those are two states that in the waning stages of that first round of COVID came out of the gate running and reviving their economies.
Right.
But third out of 50 states, that's still quite stellar. So it does say a lot about the overall economic and job picture in the state of Utah.
Yeah. Well, and when you talk about Florida and what was the other state you mentioned? Florida and Georgia. We're talking long-term powerhouses of economic development, right? And not only that, population size that they have there and resources. And there's something here in Utah that we always talk about in economic development and in businesses. Utah punches far above its weight, if that makes sense. And kind of, yeah. Anyways, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Picking the coverage, so to speak. Yeah. And that makes a perfect sense because, as you mentioned, Florida has prided itself on being a business-friendly climate.
Yeah.
Georgia in recent years wanting to follow Florida's lead, their neighboring state. So they've got kind of a competition going. But yeah, that's a perfect analogy for Utah because it's sitting right there, more or less in a remote part of the country.
Right.
They're being able to thrive economically is a great place for jobs.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Southern Utah, and I think this is part of why we're so excited about these rankings and the recent years where 3 of the Southern Utah cities are ranked in the top 5 in the country is because Southern Utah, a lot of the economic development and everything in Utah is recognized up north around the Salt Lake. The Wasatch Front is what we call it here in the state. But Southern Utah,
that's not a close commute either. It's not.
No, you're talking 3.5 hours, right? Yeah. 3.5 to 4, depending on where you're going or how fast you're driving. But, and so Southern Utah has really been growing and in economic development, in residential and everything else. But it's always kind of been viewed as, this smaller submarket of maybe Salt Lake City yeah, exactly. Or even of Vegas. We're a little closer to Vegas than we are to Salt Lake, to be honest, here in Southern Utah. And so, one of the things that we've done recently is myself and my peers from Washington City, from St. George, and from Washington County have gotten together and expanded the Southern Utah Economic Alliance to establish ourselves as a regional market that can demonstrate that it can compete with the Salt Lakes, with the Vegases, with the Denvers, or these major Western markets, because we have this interesting blend when you look at southwestern Utah, where Iron County and Cedar City, we have rail and we have a lot of manufacturing, whereas down in Washington County, they have a lot of distribution, and we both have this combo of tourism and great weather. I always like to joke, in the same day, you can go skiing at our ski resort here in Iron County and then drive down to Washington County and go water skiing on the reservoir out down there. So anyways, I'm kind of blabbing about it.
And the other thing too is that you're right there on I-15. So that's easy access, and that's key. That's something that a lot of folks when starting businesses don't take into account, is that, easy access in and out.
Yeah.
Right. I-15.
Well, and you see what's interesting throughout Utah, especially up north, you see that, and it's happening down here now as well, is there's a lot of cluster around the I-15 corridor. And then over the years, as that starts to infill, all of a sudden you see these booms west of I-15. And that's happening down here. That's where a lot of our manufacturing is booming now down here. So I think you're spot on. The transportation plays such a big role between we have I-15, we have rail, and we've got multiple regional airports down here. But I'm blabbing too much. And what I'd really like to dive in is you're the writer, you're the analyst. I want to pick your brain. So from what I understand, you have a very objective scoring process in how you rank these. Walk our listeners through, how do you score this, and take us, first give us the high level of maybe those categories that you score in, and then walk us in detail of each of those categories and what you're really looking for as you analyze this.
Well, what we did is that we compared more than 1,300 cities across 3 business-related dimensions: business environment, access to resources, and business cost. And then we applied those with 18 relevant metrics, and those cover everything from the growth rate of the business, number of small business, investor access, and labor costs. And we assign weights to them and then just rank them 1 to 1,300 plus.
Wow.
And it came up Utah at the very top, 4 out of the top 5. And Bozeman, Montana at number 5, another, I guess you would call an outlier.
Yeah.
They're in the mountain, out there in the Mountain West.
Yeah. It's kind of cool. And then, Fort Myers, Florida is like squeaking in number 2, right? Like kind of, you have these Western states that are in the top 5, and then you've got Fort Myers there.
Fort Myers at number 2, right there in a very business rich area, right there in Southwest Florida. So.
Right. Yeah. So there were 3 areas that stood out to me in these rankings and these scorings. Is 1 is business environment rank, 2 is access to resources rank, and 3 is business cost rank. So first, walk me through business environment rank. What are you looking for as you're ranking it and applying a weight to these 1,300 cities? What are you looking for in the business environment, and how do you rank that and apply that weight?
Well, business environment includes less tangible things like startups per capita. And that's one common thread between the Utah cities. There's a very high rate of startups per capita. In fact, St. George is first in that one. Average growth in small businesses, which is key because, as you may well know, 35% of new businesses fail in the first 2 years and 48% fail the first 5. And we're right there at that COVID window where maybe someone who had a startup going is probably on the verge of failing. So that's something that we look at. Of course, we look at the average length of work hours in a week, average commute time, average revenue per business. Those all fall under business environment. And all 3 of the Utah cities rank very well in that particular dimension. Access to resources, that's investor access, how much capital is available for businesses, how's the business loan climate, is it a friendly business loan climate? All 3 of those cities rank well in that perspective. Business costs is another one, and where all 3 cities rank very well is not only in office space availability, but affordability.
Oh, okay. Like price per square foot and
exactly, and if
utilities.
And if the numbers, St. George, very cheap office space, costing around almost $10.75 per square foot. Contrast that with the most expensive city, which is nearly $62 per. So it's
wow.
So office space, it's available and it's affordable. Now in St. George in particular too, commutes are fairly short, about 17 minutes average. My sister worked in the Washington, D.C. suburbs, and she would kill for a 17-minute commute.
Well, I always joke because when I lived up in Salt Lake County in Utah County up north, my commute would be 45 minutes to go, maybe 10 miles sometimes. And here I'm sometimes, well, for example, if I want to go from Cedar City to St. George, say I've got a meeting in St. George, we're talking, I can't even remember how many miles it is. We're talking a long drive mileage wise, but still only 45 minutes. Right. So, going, I should have looked this up. Let's Google it. How many miles is it from Cedar City to St. George? Let's see. Google says it's 48 miles. So we're going more than a mile a minute, essentially.
In the same amount of time it would take you to navigate through Salt Lake suburbs.
Well, yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, at my house here in Cedar City, it literally is 5 minutes to my office just to drive, or 15 minutes anywhere in town, which is a nice perk. We love having that. Well, there was something about the business environment part that you were saying. Tell me some of those key factors in business environment again, because there was a couple things that I wanted to maybe dive into a little bit.
Yeah, the average growth in the number of small businesses, which is key, because that's an indicator of how much your survivability rate, whether your chances is not only being successful starting up, but being able to sustain long-term growth. Right. And in that, Cedar City ranked 5th in that particular. No, wait a minute. I'm sorry.
We were 7th, or no, I'm sorry, 4th in the nation in business environment.
Right, and sixth in the average growth in number of small businesses.
Oh, really? Okay. So what I find interesting about that is, again, this is a punching above the weight thing. There are so many prominent companies that are started in Utah and headquartered in Utah that people just have no idea. There's Cotopaxi, which is up north. There's Ultra running shoes. If anybody's ever heard of Ultra running shoes, that started here in Utah. Yeah. There's just several of these little startup businesses that started here and grew. And Utah prides itself and has a big campaign right now with the governor's office of Utah's the startup state, because there's this national recognition of how well startups do. But one thing that I'm curious to ask you about is, it's not just about small business, though. Those small businesses and those startups are more indicators of the survivability of the spectrum of businesses, right?
Oh, exactly. And it speaks to the overall economic climate also, because Utah has, the job market is good, the job growth rate is good. So yeah, all of that kind of ties in together. But you mentioned something earlier you were talking about, which is key when it comes to startups, about these business alliances and getting those off the ground, up and running, and being able to more or less coexist with state and local officials. Once you get all of that, you get that perfect storm, and it seems to be what's going on in Utah, and I know that's what goes on in Florida and some of these other states in which the businesses are thriving. Everyone seems to be coming together, and they're on the same page. Some states, California, for example, not quite as business friendly.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because there's this thing here in Utah where we have a lot of Californians and other people from around the country moving here. And long-term locals are like, don't bring all the Californians here, which I don't necessarily disagree with, because we like the balance of kind of this small town feel, even though we're kind of, we're still growing. But one thing that I always joke and tell people is, the Californians moving here, they're not trying to bring California here. They're refugees.
I was just about to raise that point. They're not coming over there to take over. They're coming there to escape. Yeah. So maybe you have some would-be entrepreneurs who are just frustrated with look what's going on in California, just trying to get a housing permit to get your house rebuilt after the fires. Yeah. They're not looking to conquer new land. They're trying to move into an environment, and Utah is this business-friendly environment in that part of the country. So it's an easy decision for them to make. Exactly. It's an
easy, natural decision. And that's what you want in a business-friendly environment. You want people to say, oh, it's easy for us to bring our company here or to start a company here because the process is simple. There was something else that I wanted to talk about. Before I'm going to digress a little bit. So we've talked actually quite a bit. Oh, I know what it was. You talked about that coordination, and that's something that my peers and I in Washington County and Iron County that we've really tried to do. And with the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, we work hand in hand together, trying to implement EdTIF and RedTIF programs, tax increment financing programs. We work with, there's a statewide program called Custom Fit. And here in Cedar City, we have Southwest Tech and Southern Utah University. And Southwest Tech really leads the way in this Custom Fit program, where this program will offer up to 40% costs, covering the costs up to 40% of training programs for new businesses or existing businesses. And year over, those businesses can request that. And Southwest Tech really leads the way in the state in implementing that program. But not only that, our universities, Southern Utah University and Southwest Tech, work with like our manufacturers to create training specific curriculum for these businesses to be successful. And I got to give a shout out to Utah Tech down in Washington County as well. How does the role of the universities and workforce training play into this factor as well?
Well, that should be ground zero for any type of business startup. And you're going to see a trend if you haven't already, because there's a lot of talk about the cost of four-year universities and investing all this money and not really learning anything. Mm-hmm. So you're going to see a groundswell of more job training, vocational type training. So I think the community colleges and even the vocational schools, and also to some degree, the military.
Yeah.
You're going to see a major trend towards people gravitating towards maybe how to start up their own business. Maybe because a lot of industries, my wife is a floor nurse studying to be a nurse practitioner now. And sometimes there's burnout. There's burnout at corporate level, large industries. So a lot of people are exploring an option. And in the community colleges, if anyone is considering, or if you're a rising senior in high school, don't dismiss at all the notion of grabbing a certification program through community college. If nothing else, if 2 years down the road, you could always transfer to, but don't dismiss that. Because I think we're at a point now where it's time to start celebrating the people who built the schools more so than the people that are attending them.
Yeah. It's funny. I had a boss. I actually worked out in Florida for a couple of years, and my city manager there, when we would go speak to school groups, he would tell them, he would say, a good plumber can make just as much money as a good city manager. And I loved that he said that, because here he is in a position of leadership. He had several degrees, and it said, look, find what's right for you to focus in on a skill. He still get educated in whatever that skill is and whatever form of education is needed. But you're absolutely right. Our technical skills and certifications, we've seen a big boom in that. In fact, Southwest Tech and Southern Utah University, they have a dual enrollment program. And the high school is literally across the street from Southwest Tech. So there's kind of this trifecta of the high school can go take these classes for nothing, essentially. High school kids can at Southwest Tech or at Southern Utah University. And then when they enroll in a class at Southwest Tech or SUU, and say they're doing stuff at Southwest Tech, and they decide, oh, now I want to get a 4-year degree, they could transfer it over, and SUU accepts all that. So now they've got these technical certifications and they could go get their degree. Or say there's someone in an engineering degree at SUU and they want to go better understand welding and maybe some of the technical side of that. They have this dual enrollment program. Anyways, I'm blabbing again, but it's...
Now, to that point, though, also, when you finish your certification program and you get your entry-level job, you may not draw the starting salaries that someone coming out of a more professional-based curriculum.
Right.
But you're not saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt.
Yeah, exactly. The debt-to-income ratio.
And the chances of you increasing your income growing is a lot higher, too.
Yeah.
Several years ago, I have a degree in journalism. And several years ago, I was asked to speak to undergraduate journalism class in my alma mater. And probably part of the reason they never asked me to come back was someone had asked me, what would you recommend for someone considering a career in journalism? And I pointed to the open window at the back of the room and said, you see that computer science technology business building? And get a degree in that.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. I mean, it is actually my undergrad is from the School of Journalism at Brigham Young University. So I'm with you. That's actually my original background is public relations. I went that side in my undergrad. And, there is something to be said about the balance. I tried to be really wise. I worked through college and I didn't go into any student debt throughout college. But I would watch some of my peers that would go just get these insane loans. And I thought, well, how is that going to give you a leg up if you're just paying loans off for the rest of your life? And so you've got to find a profession. And if you're going to, and this is not to knock traditional school or technical college, but you got to balance it. Like, don't just go in blind. It's like people who just get out of high school and go get a car loan and they can't make the payments. College, schooling, education is the exact same way in how you approach that.
Right. And one thing I found over the years is that for the most part, employers aren't too overly impressed with the degrees. They're going to train you the way that they want you to do the job.
Yeah.
My father was a mechanic, auto mechanic in North Carolina for pretty much his entire adult life. And they would bring in these mechanics, these certified mechanics who essentially didn't know one end of a adjustable wrench from the other. Mm-hmm. He would say, give me someone who knows the job, not the manual.
Yeah, right. Well, some of my favorite classes in both undergrad and graduate program within my master's degree, which was public administration, were the adjunct professors or the courses that had the hands-on practice and not the busy work. And you see a lot of schools moving toward that now, even traditional schools. I know SUU does a lot of that, trying to get students engaged in a practical level in addition to the academic. The benefit, like you said, a lot of those degree type jobs out of school is because there's some sense of confidence that, they were dedicated to earning this degree, that they have a certain level of understanding, which serves as a baseline to now train them the way that the company wants them trained, right? It also gives confidence that for management type level things. So for example, an associate's in nursing versus a bachelor's in nursing, the only difference really is your ability to move up in management for the most part, right? My wife's a nurse too. So you said your wife's a nurse, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that's where some of the distinction is. And so finding out what you want to do. And I have a friend several years ago, he was a nurse at a hospital and he finally moved up in a management position. And after, I think it was only a year, maybe it was a couple of years, he hated it. He's like, I do not like the management side. And so he didn't really care to move on. And he went back to being a shift nurse and he was content with that and made good money. He actually felt like he made better money on shift rather than in management. Mm-hmm. And so those are the kind of things that you've got to evaluate when you're going to school. And we're really digressing on the workforce side, but I think the workforce side is important. And maybe I should couch it with a question to you. Why is workforce so important for business and for startups?
Well, it's key on a number of fronts, and mainly it's well, there's a sense of pride there. There has to be. Mm-hmm. And as you were mentioning, and you also mentioned key also when we were talking about the alliances, government and education, all of those, and it seems like you've got the perfect trifecta going there. Now, as far as work, I mean, it's a reflection of your community, more or less. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at some of these, and I think for the most part too, in southern Utah, you have some pretty much or at least startups that are leaning towards being recession proof. I would think so, because automation and AI are coming, take a lot of jobs. Look at places like Detroit or Cleveland, these once thriving hubs of industry that are basically hell of themselves because jobs are being automated or moved overseas. So I think we're going to see a trend back towards the startups becoming more and more prevalent, and some of them maybe even growing into larger corporations.
Yeah, and that entrepreneurial spirit. It's funny that you say that. Even in the tech industry, you see that. I just listened to something with Mark Zuckerberg with Meta, or Facebook as most people know it. And I can't remember the exact percentage, so you'll have to look it up, but so don't quote me on the percentage. But he said something like 30% of their coding now, they do it by AI. And so you think about that. If Facebook or Meta is using AI, is now at least in the tech world, is the tech world version of automation for manufacturing or factories, right? That's all it is. And so being able to grow with that or capitalize on that in a capitalistic environment, right, makes all the difference. Okay, so I want to shift now. Let's talk access to resources. And we've been actually talking about those resources, but tell us describe again the variety of types of resources that makes a successful business environment.
Well, it's a number of things, and it could be, again, starts at City Hall and through your state and local legislation, exploring funding there. There's private investor access. And again, the 3 Utah cities rank very well into access to that capital. The financial markets seem to be in more of a business-friendly environment. How do you
determine, when you're doing this analysis, how do you determine our access? And looking at all these 1,300 cities, what elements do you look at to figure that out?
Well, that's a question that the people who compile the data could probably better answer.
Oh, so you're grabbing the data from those that are compiling it.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
I'm just taking the data and breaking it down in plain English.
That's a good point. That's what I always joke about in PR is I dumb it down for the layman to understand.
Taking the complicated and making it simple.
So I'm going to take a complete different shift now. You gave a highlight of what WalletHub is. How long have you been with WalletHub?
I have been with WalletHub since 2018.
And do you and say that again?
And it has grown because it was a startup for, I think, around 2009, 2010.
That's what I was going to ask. When did WalletHub start?
Yeah, it was a startup from our current CEO, who was a rising executive at Capital One in the DC area, and broke off and started his own thing. And now speaking of business friendly, when I first started at WalletHub in 2018, we were based out of Washington, DC. I work remotely. I'm here in Columbia, South Carolina, and I've worked from the get-go. We have a global workforce. We have staff in Romania and the Philippines, all over, worldwide.
That's awesome.
The bummer for them is that we operate off of East Coast time. So,
I see. Yeah.
But post-COVID, once we were in the throes of COVID and the lockdowns, CEO, he just decided we're getting out. We're headquartered in Miami.
You're headquartered in Miami, where the sun is shining.
Much more friendly business environment. They were a lot more accommodating. Of course, during COVID, the lockdowns weren't as draconian as they were in places DC.
We found that in Utah, actually, because the lockdowns weren't as stringent as some of these other places. That was part of, what we joked about earlier, the refugees coming here and saying, hey, we need to look here because they're making it friendly for us to continue doing business so that we don't have to close our doors, right? Whether that's the door of your home or the door of your business. Now, with you said you came in 2018. You've talked about a journalism degree. Do you also have a finance degree too, or what's your background there?
Well, I have a minor in economics and business administration,
Oh, okay.
and transition. I started out, my first real job was a sports writer.
Oh, really? Yeah,
in,
that's kind of
in
like
journalism. Yeah.
that's kind of like the dream. A lot of people that go into journalism are like, I want to be a sports writer. I hear either cover sports or cover politics. Politics side, I'm like, I don't know that I would want to cover that. Sports sounds more fun.
Well, I have a background in print and in radio also.
Oh, yeah.
So when it came time graduating, looking for that first real job,
Yeah.
this was in like 1990, 91. We were in the midst of a recession.
Mm-hmm.
So I just took the first one that came, because back then, if you got a job offer, you took it, because
right. Sure.
There were a lot of people, and you probably know a lot of people in journalism who never even got that first job in their field because the job market was so tight. Probably doing something totally different. So
right.
I was very fortunate I could have gone either direction. Newspaper came calling first, so jumped on it and was very fortunate to be able to at least start off in the field.
Yeah. So my first job was just a couple years before the big the recession in 2009.
2008.
2008-ish. And I started out, well, I did a ton of internships. Speaking of practical applications. So when I did my undergrad, by the time I was done, I'd probably done half a dozen to 10 different internships, small, big. I wanted to get that practical experience. So my work experience went longer than that. But when I officially graduated in 2007, I remember my first job back then, and even then it was pennies, was in the 20,000s salary.
Yeah.
and looking back, I'm like, wow. And then the recession hit hard. And I had made the choice. Actually, I started my job, I decided to step away after I wanted to go work for a few years and then go get my master's. So I decided to start my master's. And after getting into it a little bit, I'm like, I'm going to take a break from work, focus on my master's. And I thought I would get, I thought I would do that for just a few months, not very long. Anyways, and then the recession hit hard. Yeah. And it took me 9 months and all of our savings by the time I found a new job. So yeah, it was crazy, but we survived and we're back. And, this is a personal tangent, but kind of applicable to some of what we're seeing right now where, there's some uncertainty on the economy and, policies. And I'm not going to get into the politics or say, take sides with one thing or another, but you have to be really wise. So my wife and I, when we worked, we saved up real well in case there was an issue, and then the recession hit, and it took us, I think, only 2 or 3 years to build up a pretty substantial savings, and which we ended up spending in that 9 months. But it took us, I think it was like almost 10 years before we caught back up fully. Yeah. And so, really you have to plan ahead and be wise, and having a good environment makes that more possible. So one thing I wanted to ask you is, we've talked about what it takes to have a good environment. What are the things, because this isn't just, it's the best and worst small cities to start a business. What, and this is so that cities can improve, is why I'm asking this question. When you're looking at the analysis, what makes, and obviously it's somewhat the opposite of the positive things we've talked about, but what are some of the things you see that communities are doing that just are awful, that's turning away businesses? And you've talked a little bit about that when we were kind of ragging on poor California a little bit, but what are some of those things that just turn business away?
High cost of living, for one. Now, as far as businesses go, high corporate taxes, high office space, lack of office space, a lot of rural. I'm looking at the list now, and it's like the bottom 4 are all in California.
Really?
And a few more, but at the top. But yeah, it's all about, and again, we talked about those alliances. A lot of local governments in these states where the cities aren't job friendly.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're stay local, it's a hostile business environment. In some cities, government is the industry, so they kind of frown on bringing in any competition. So you have to be able to make it at least economically friendly, and also demographically or even socially.
Yeah,
crime rates for one. An area that you would want to live in.
Right. Do you factor in crime rates in this study?
We do not
okay.
in this particular. We were just strictly on the numbers.
We would have scored high. Two things. We had a company that came here, a large manufacturer, and we do the tours. Actually, I'm going to kind of touch on both these things with this example. So one of the things that we do when a company's looking at the area, we bring in to the table our university, our tech school. We bring in existing businesses and manufacturers. This is when we do a site tour of Cedar City in Byron County. We bring in Department of Workforce Services. We bring in a representative of the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, my office, a representative of the Utah Inland Port Authority, and we're all at the table. And we may break that up throughout the site visit, and then or sometimes have everybody at a physical table for that company to ask questions. And this one company was wowed by the collaboration, but one of the things that wowed them the most, they said, well, we're very confident that we don't have to worry much about the drug testing side of things. Does crime even exist here? They said laughing, joking. And it's so true. It may, like just the other day, one of my neighbors was one of my coworkers was saying he's originally from California. And he said, yeah, we were talking about kids being on electronics too much. And he said, here, at least I'm in a community where I can go let my kids ride their bike like I did when I was a kid in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And it's so true. Like, you don't have to worry. Like, you just say, come home when the street lights turn on, sort of a thing. We still have that environment here, which is amazing.
Funny you mentioned that, because I was driving through my neighborhood about 6 months or so ago, and there were two kids, 10, 11-year-olds, riding their bikes. Nothing fancy, standard bikes, and they were in street clothes. They weren't wrapped up in bubble wrap with particular. Yeah. And I looked around, and I didn't see any parents hovering over them. I wanted to reach out to these kids, like, I want to meet you up here and shake their hands.
I know, right? Yeah. I mean, we definitely live in a different environment nowadays than we did when I grew up in the 80s and early 90s. But it's nice to have that sense of community here, which goes to that quality of life, which goes to some of what you were talking about earlier. One thing too that I said when I took the job here doing economic development, and then when I got here, most of my career, I mean, I've definitely seen collaboration throughout my career. It's a key to any success that I've had in my career, and any success of any organization. But I was so used to seeing silos and having to bring people to the table and, create the buy-in. And in any situation, you still got to create buy-in. But the thing that just blew me away in Cedar City is the level of collaboration is so much. We literally have collaboration committees and groups who are almost replicating what another collaboration group is doing. And so we almost have the opposite problem. Rather than so many silos and nobody's talking, we have so many collaborative groups. We're kind of stepping on each other. And I'm like, didn't we just, you see someone, you're like, didn't we just meet collaborating in this other group? And it's a much better, if you want to call it a problem, it's a much better problem to have. And that's what we're trying to do regionally too. But I don't know. When you're talking collaboration, I don't want to beat a drum too much. So if you feel like we've already hammered this, but what are some of the key points in collaboration that you think are most valuable to business?
Well, organization is key. time management is key.
Right.
Having a well thought out agenda.
Yeah. No.
Short, simple. I mean, you don't need a manifesto. Just a couple of key points. Throw some ideas out. Again, it doesn't need to be any kind of nuclear summit. Just keep it.
Right.
And eventually, more and more people will come to the table with ideas. And you have to make it like we're doing a conversational.
Right.
If you ask yes no questions, you get yes no answers. So
right.
it's key. It's just to throw out. It's like, well, instead of, I mean, we're not lawyers. I mean, just instead of asking, just say, talk about this. What do you think about this?
Right. So in looking at Cedar City specifically, what are things that you could, we're ranked number 3, which is amazing. Last year we were ranked number 1. What are things though that you think we could do in our business environment to improve it even more? What are things that we could make better?
Wow. Yeah, you went from 1 to 3. I would say just maintain the status quo and keep an eye on what St. George is doing. I'm pretty sure they were probably keeping an eye on you guys. Oh, okay, well, they're doing this, so.
we have a friendly banter back and forth with my peer down there about it. So yeah, that's great. I like the advice. Keep doing what you're doing. And you kind of alluded to that earlier when we talked about the state of Utah going from, I think the state of Utah was number 1 and went to 3 as well, right? And you said it's not that they were doing anything wrong or did something that they were doing something different. It's just that some other communities and areas stepped it up more, right? And so keep investing. Essentially, I'm putting words in your mouth. You're saying invest in what you've been investing in. Just enhance what we've been doing.
Oh yeah, the adage goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't reinvent the wheel. Any other cliche you can think of.
Yeah. Now you said maintain the status quo. Now usually that has a negative connotation, especially if your status quo is making you stagnant. But you mean maintain this status quo in how we're investing.
That high standard. Don't be complacent. This is probably a better way to phrase that. Yeah.
I gotcha. Well, okay. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I did on a high level. So we talked a little bit about the area, or pretty in depth about the area, and we had some fun workforce and education tangents. Talk to me. We briefly highlighted the state. Talk to me more about the state of Utah, and maybe it's repetition of kind of what we were talking about of southwestern Utah here. But what makes the state of Utah shine for being such a small state punching above its weight?
Pretty much the same things that you're seeing in your small cities. It's a very business friendly environment. It's a low tax environment. They're encouraging job growth for starters. So
right.
Yeah. So it's and again, it's not that they're doing anything wrong. Again, you have this perfect storm where Georgia and Florida just rose to the top. But yeah, Utah, and there's industry variety there too. Utah is starting to become, at least the Salt Lake City area, is starting to become a tech hub. Primarily because Silicon Valley is becoming so unbearably expensive. Yeah. Would-be entrepreneurs are breaking away from some of these tech giants and doing their own thing in Utah. So
yeah, we've actually had some of those tech companies. Adobe went to Lehi, Utah, which is Lehi, I think, is in the top 25. It's 22. We call it Silicon Slopes. Is our counter catchphrase. But it's been growing. Our aerospace and defense industry has been long standing here, but now there's a boost or a drive to push it along even further, and our advanced manufacturing as well. So yeah, well, that's great. I'm so appreciative of you jumping on this call. Are there are there other things that maybe you would like to highlight talking about this and what we can anticipate for the future?
Well, just close by saying that those that are at the bottom and not doing as well, take a look at what the ones at the top are doing. And if it involves things such as maybe changing your government leadership, then that might be the first step.
Interesting. Yeah, because you need that cohesiveness, that collaboration to work together to make a business-friendly environment. And it starts at the top.
Having government leaders with business experience certainly helped.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure. Well, Chip, thank you so much for coming on. Chip Lupo, writer and analyst for WalletHub. We are so excited to be ranked so well, and we hope we can maintain that high level of status quo. But we appreciate your time and coming on the Explore Local podcast.
It's my pleasure. Hope to talk again soon. Oops.
Yep. Well, we'll be in touch. Thanks, Chip. Have a good one.
You too.
See ya.
Bye now.